Introduction. A typical problem for the vast majority of subordinates is interaction with the boss. It largely determines whether a person gets satisfaction from work or not. People who do not have a good relationship with their superiors face a huge number of difficulties. They are assigned the most unpleasant tasks, their ideas are ignored, their creative suggestions are ignored, and there is no question of promotion and salary increase. These unfortunates experience acute stress, often chronic in nature, suffering from low self-esteem and anxiety attacks. In fact, they are forced to overcome mental trauma every day. All of this can be avoided by mastering the skills of successful management of the chief. Most of us think that it's the other way around, it's the bosses who manage the subordinates. But experienced employees are well aware it is a two-way road. The subordinate does not have to be a passive object of management. He must actively work to find common ground, mutually beneficial methods of solving daily tasks, and a deep understanding of the incentives of the manager. If you are aware of what drives your boss, what his hidden thoughts and motives are, then it is much easier for you to, shall we say, please him. And a person who meets the needs and expectations of the boss simply cannot fail to become a privileged employee in the shortest possible time. In this book we will walk with you through all the stages of the process of managing your boss, so that in a week you will become his favorite subordinate. On Sunday we will analyze the psychological portrait of a leader. We will analyze the qualities that a person in a managerial position simply can't help but possess. On Monday we will conduct a more specific analysis. With the help of diagnostic tests we will figure out the features of personality, character, and thinking specifically of your leader. On Tuesday we will change the approach and begin to analyze the psychological contract between you and your supervisor, that is, we will examine the unspoken set of expectations that are vital to the establishment of a partnership. Once the expectations have been defined, on Wednesday we will discuss how to make the best possible impression on your boss, through body language signals and emotion management. When all the basics are in place, on Thursday we'll explore specific ways to manage a boss, how to get a promotion or a raise, how to properly complain about overload, etc. Of course, not every boss can be called a nice person. That's why on Friday we'll look at various hellish scenarios and figure out what to do if your boss is a real pain in the ass. And finally, on Saturday, we'll discuss all the other common problems that clients have told me about over the years. Sandyman. Sunday. Analyzing the psychology of an executive. The first step in managing your boss is understanding. If you appreciate and understand your boss, it is much easier to manage him. Before we start discussing specific ways to diagnose your boss, which we will do on Monday, we need to understand the basic characteristics typical of any boss. Researchers have discovered many qualities of true leaders, from the skills they must possess to the incentives that motivate them. We'll begin this chapter by examining how your boss spends his day. How he does his planning, how he communicates with subordinates and management, and what tasks he accomplishes. For example, motivating employees, negotiating with partners, managing your own day, etc. Then we will move on to the more important psychological aspects of the boss's character in terms of his attitude toward his subordinates, carrot and stick or cooperation and trust, and his motivation toward his work. We will analyze his need for achievement, power, or sympathy from others. These are the main issues we will discuss today. What does your boss do during the day? What skills does he have? How does he feel about you? What is his motivation? What does your boss do? Most managers and leaders have to deal with all kinds of tasks, and managing you is only a small part of their enormous workload. The average leader spends about a third of their time and energy on traditional management activities, planning or decision-making. A third of the time is spent on communication, including writing. And the remaining third is devoted to supervising subordinates, motivating and retraining, and fostering relationships. Understanding exactly how your boss spends his time will allow you to look inside his head and get a better idea of exactly what worries and concerns occupy him. This is very important because many people are simply unable to go beyond their perception of their boss, and in that perception, he only performs those tasks that are associated with those very people. However, only a small fraction of the actions of any boss are related to you. That is, any tasks that you perform for him and any requests that you address to him may well get lost in the vast flow of incoming information. We'll talk more about this on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday when we'll explore ways to work effectively with a supervisor. Qualities of a supervisor. In order to handle all of your tasks effectively, your supervisor must have a lot of skills, including the ability to adequately distribute tasks among subordinates, the ability to assert your authority and take responsibility, ideal time management and work organization skills, ability to self-motivate and show initiative, the ability to maintain team spirit, motivation abilities, human skills such as empathy, communication skills, the ability to communicate and talk to people at different levels, that is, with management and subordinates, the ability to delegate responsibility. 7. These are skills that supervisors learn throughout their careers, but many of them depend on their psychological traits. Not everyone aspires to be a supervisor, and not everyone is capable of handling the role. Psychologists have identified several character traits or personality traits that form the basis of an executive's behavior. And your boss probably possesses some or all of these qualities. Understanding the psychological portrait of the boss will allow you to better understand his incentives. The boss must be sensitive enough to read people and situations. He must notice when subordinates are not satisfied with their work, when they are ready for more difficult tasks, when the situation develops in such a way that change is inevitable and necessary. The boss must have an analytical mind and the ability to solve problems. Many turn to him for solutions, and although a number of conclusions depend on training and experience, much relies on an innate tendency to think outside the box. A supervisor must be decisive. Even at school, some children make decisions quickly, while others are unsure of themselves and their ability to choose the right path. The supervisor must have the self-confidence necessary to implement the decisions he or she makes. The boss must have social competence. He must be able to communicate with different people, listen carefully, motivate people and comply with the rules of social etiquette in a variety of situations. A boss must be emotionally resilient, holding a punch, responding to a punch, and rising from a knockdown. Nothing should shake his confidence and decision-making ability. The boss must be proactive. Such people do not wait for something to happen or to happen by itself. They are proactive and initiate their own projects. Bosses should be creative. Bosses are often creative people, capable of perceiving things from different angles, offering non-standard solutions and plans that go beyond the usual and traditional. These are the qualities that make up the personal profile of the ideal boss. However, if your boss had all of these qualities, you probably wouldn't need to read this book. Of course, not all bosses are the same. Everyone has these qualities to a different degree. Most likely, it is the missing or weaker qualities that cause problems between the boss and his subordinates. In addition, management style depends largely not only on personal qualities and skills, but also on one's own attitude towards human nature and behavior. The attitude of your supervisor toward you. To summarize, the attitude of superiors toward subordinates depends on their attitude toward human nature and behavior in general. There are two opposite types of this attitude. The carrot and stick attitude. If a supervisor professes this attitude, then he makes the following assumptions. The average person is naturally lazy and does not like to work. Most people need coercion, control, management, and even threats the only way an organization can achieve its goals. The common man has no responsibility or ambition. He works only for financial security. 7. Bosses with this attitude believe that the only way to achieve organizational goals is through rewards and punishments. And they see their job as being authoritative and tough leaders. 2. The cooperation and trust attitude. There are other leaders as well. They make the following assumptions in their attitudes toward people. Most people are motivated to work and want to enjoy their work. Coercion is not necessary if people are given tasks that meet not only the organization's goals, but also their own. Most people can be trusted to complete a task without constant monitoring and supervision. People don't just work for financial well-being. A supervisor who has this attitude believes that cooperation with his subordinates is the best way to lead. He seeks to create an environment in which people themselves are willing to work to their full potential and achieve the goals set for them by the organization, while also achieving their own. What motivates the typical boss? Psychologists have identified 5 motivators that motivate people in their lives. These motivations and needs vary from person to person. So some people may have strong needs in one area and weak needs in another, while another person will have the opposite. So what are these needs? 1. The need for achievement, PDOST. People who are strongly motivated by the need for achievement are preoccupied with their own success. They are constantly in a state of competition with others. 2. The need for sympathy, PSYMP. People motivated by this need are concerned with creating, maintaining, or restoring close, personal, emotional relationships with others. 3. The need for power, PVLAST. Such people are motivated by the need to win an argument or quarrel. They seek to control or dominate those around them. 4. The need for independence, PSAM. Adults with such motivation always strive to perform a task without help from others. 5. The need for restraint of activity, PETER. People with this motivation seek to act for the good of the organization or society, even if it comes at the expense of their personal desires or needs. Which of these needs motivates your leader the most? Successful organizational leaders most often have the following set. High need for power. High need for restraint of activity, above average need for achievement, low need for sympathy. Low need for independence. Thus, the average supervisor most often has a high need for power or control, seeks to act for the good of the organization, and feels a certain need for personal achievement. He is not too keen on building strong relationships with subordinates, i.e. you, or working independently. However, it is very important to remember that all of this is the profile of the average boss, and yours may have a completely different type of motivation. When you understand what motivates your boss, you can begin to act on those motivations. For example, if your boss has a strong need for restraint, he expects the same from you. He will not appreciate you putting your own needs or goals ahead of the needs and goals of the organization. A boss with a high need for autonomy will not appreciate any unsolicited help from you. And a boss with a low need for sympathy will not want to communicate with you outside of work or spend the time and effort to form friendships. So don't embarrass him by trying to get close to you. Summary. So today we began our journey toward a deeper understanding of the type of person who most often becomes a boss, a manager or leader. After examining how your boss divides his personal time and work, we began to get into his mind and the daily concerns that occupy that mind. As we have seen, it is very important to see the big picture that your boss sees. It is a vital first step to understanding how to meet your boss's expectations. We also considered the qualities of a typical boss: sensitivity, analytical mindset, determination, social competence, emotional stability, proactivity, and creativity. The list is not long. Weaker bosses may not have all of these qualities. But understanding such gaps can be a good starting point for recognizing the difficulties that arise in relationships. Finally, we've dealt with attitudes about leading people and the needs that can motivate your boss. Tomorrow we'll talk about how to do a more specific and in-depth analysis of your boss. Questions, answers are at the end of the book. 1. What does your supervisor spend the most time on? A. For planning, decision-making, and document management. B. Communication with subordinates and management. C. Attendance at meetings. D. Writing reports and other documents. 2. Which of the following skills are important to a good supervisor? A. The ability to do as much as possible on your own. B. The ability to maintain a professional distance in relations with subordinates. C. Ability to delegate responsibilities. D. The ability to take a calm and measured approach to decision-making. 3. What is social competence? A. The ability to make people laugh. B. The ability to tell stories that illustrate ideas. C. Confidence that allows you to safely enter rooms where strangers are present. D. Ability to listen and communicate at all levels. 4. A supervisor who has a carrot and stick attitude believes that A. People can be trusted to do any work on their own. B. Most people like their jobs. C. Subordinates must be constantly and sternly supervised. D. Workplace penalties rarely do any good. 5. The supervisor, who has a cooperative and trusting attitude, believes that A. Subordinates usually work to the best of their ability and can be trusted. B. Most subordinates need constant supervision. C. People only work for money. D. Achieving a true spirit of cooperation with subordinates is very difficult. 6. Authoritarian bosses believe that A. Incentives and penalties are necessary to motivate staff. B. Subordinates can motivate themselves to succeed. C. Subordinates want to realize the goals of the organization. D. Staff can work on their own schedule. 7. People with a high need for independence. A. Relying on other people for everything. B. Their primary motivation is power. C. Like to do a job from start to finish without help from others. D. Like to work together with others. 8. People motivated by the need to restrain activity. A. Preoccupied only with their own success. B. Motivated by the need to work for others. C. Strive to work for the good of the organization. D. Very proud of their own achievements. 9. Successful leaders possess A. Low need for power. B. High need for restraint of activity. C. High need for sympathy. D. High need for independence. 10. If your supervisor has a low need for sympathy, he A. Will want to communicate with his team outside of work. B. Would love to have coffee with you. C. Doesn't want to spend more time with you than necessary. D. Prone to conflict and quarrels. Monday. Diagnosing your boss. On Sunday, we discussed the typical profile of a typical boss. Now it's time to get down to the details and find out, finally, what it is that motivates your supervisor the most. Today we will focus on a more individual diagnosis of your boss, and that will be the first step to truly understanding him or her. There are many ways to classify or diagnose people and their personalities. In this chapter we use two such methods. The first is leadership style. There are 6 typical leadership styles, which are characterized by the preferred way of managing. It is up to you to figure out which particular way your boss uses. This choice is dictated by his life experience, training, and character traits. Knowing your supervisor's leadership style is vital in order to adapt your own style accordingly. The second diagnostic technique is the analysis of thinking style, that is, the way a person processes information. Understanding your boss's style of thinking will allow you to work in a way that meets his or her needs, and this, in turn, will help build a positive, harmonious relationship with him or her. The main tasks for today. Diagnosis of the boss in terms of leadership style and thinking style. Programs for diagnosing the supervisor. Tips for managing different types of bosses. Leadership style. 7. Leadership styles are the way your supervisor or senior manager performs his or her functions, how he or she usually acts and behaves in dealing with you. Here are some typical leadership styles. Dictatorial. This kind of boss believes that he or she has become a leader for a reason, and the reason is this: he or she is the best person for the job and, therefore, should dictate to subordinates what they should do and how they should do it. This kind of boss is most often motivated by a high need for power, see Sunday. He finds it difficult to see the situation from the perspective of others. He relies on rewards and punishments, believing that this is the only way to get the best out of his subordinates. Bureaucratic. This kind of boss has achieved his position by following the rules and sees no reason to change his philosophy. He lacks an entrepreneurial penchant for risk, but is a very law-abiding and reliable citizen who takes his responsibilities seriously. He answers all questions from subordinates, solves all problems, and makes all decisions based on a set of rules. Such managers like everything to be laid out and enshrined in writing. They constantly use a huge number of forms and documents to keep track of what is going on. Charismatic. This kind of boss motivates subordinates by inspiring them to achieve organizational goals rather than pursuing personal goals. Such a supervisor usually leads by personal example and elicits high commitment and performance from his or her team. Often the primary motivation of such bosses is a high need for restraint, see Sunday. Consultative. Such a supervisor may have a high need for sympathy, see Sunday. He often involves his team in discussing a problem and consults with subordinates at every opportunity. He makes decisions based on information he receives from his subordinates. Any changes to the existing order of things are made after much consultation. Such a boss is afraid of scaring off his subordinates. He does not like to make decisions alone. He lacks courage and conviction. He prefers to share responsibility. Liberal. A true liberal sees that his subordinates are quite good at their tasks and do not need constant supervision. The boss consciously decides to leave his subordinates alone and feels quite comfortable. The closest thing to such a supervisor is the cooperation and trust approach, see Sunday. 7. A test to diagnose your boss's leadership style. Do your coworkers have to compete for your boss's attention? 3. What happens more often, your boss orders you to do something or asks you to do it? 1. Does it seem to you that a supervisor is incapable of making innovative decisions? 2. Do you feel you can go to your supervisor with any concerns? 4. Do you feel that your supervisor does not involve you in the decision-making process? 1. Do you feel that the boss lacks creativity? 2. Do you feel that your supervisor is not interested in your point of view? 1. Do you feel that a supervisor only participates in the life of the department when asked to do so? 5. Have you often noticed that some changes or new techniques were introduced without consulting you? 1. Is your supervisor strict about adhering to the rules? 2. Does your boss allow you to act independently with minimal supervision? 5. Do you feel you want to work hard for your boss? 3. Do you think that the boss does not pay attention to his subordinates and starts to get into their work only when there are problems? 5. Have you ever noticed that a supervisor doesn't like it when subordinates approach him with any problems? 1. Does your boss often talk to you about the goals and global objectives of the organization? 3. Is your boss respected and loved by most of the people around you? 3. Does your boss involve you in most decisions? 4. Have you noticed that your boss is often busy with extraneous things? 1. Does the supervisor regularly bring the team together to discuss new problems? 4. Does your supervisor often show a lack of flexibility? 2. Do you think it's extremely rare for a supervisor to go into something new without consulting you? 4. Does it seem to you that your boss is not interested in what you do? 1. Is a supervisor willing to delegate his business to other people? 5. Do you sometimes feel that you have too much responsibility on your shoulders? 1. Predominantly 1 equals dictatorial style. Predominantly 2 equals bureaucratic style. Predominantly 3 equals charismatic style. Predominantly 4 equals advisory style. Predominantly 5 equals liberal style. NB, your boss's style may not be clearly defined. It is quite possible that his behavior combines 2 or 3 different styles. Tips for managing a boss according to his leadership style. Management by a dictatorial chief. Build your boss's confidence in you. Ask for permission before you do anything. Inform him of the progress of the work. Demonstrate willingness and enthusiasm to follow his orders. Managing a bureaucratic boss. Put any requests in writing. Don't expect any deviation from the rules from your boss. When you need your boss to make a decision, argue your case by the rules. Put everything in writing. Managing a charismatic supervisor. Be enthusiastic about his dreams and plans. Demonstrate that the interests of the company are above personal interests. Demonstrate loyalty to your boss and to the company as a whole. Demonstrate faith in his plans and ideas. Managing a supervisor consultant. Demonstrate a willingness to participate in the decision-making process. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. Support your boss and show your approval. Involve him in informal socializing. Invite him to have lunch together or go to the pub after work. Managing a liberal boss. Show that you can be trusted with certain tasks. Send him emails with information about the progress of your work. Only ask for help if you have a problem. Don't bother your boss with trivial problems and worries. Thinking style. Have you ever wondered why some people are easy to talk to and reach consensus with, while others are almost impossible? Why are some people completely unable to understand your best intentions? This reflects the differences in thinking style that are specific to each of us. Thinking style is how we think and how we process information. In an outstanding book on thinking styles, Beddoes-Jones, 1999, identified several different ways of processing information that lead to differences in thinking style. These ways can be used to differentiate and diagnose your boss type. And it will allow you to work in a way that facilitates rather than hinders his work. The list below shows some of the thinking styles that may be characteristic of your boss. Detailed, this kind of boss prefers to process information in small parts, one bite. He pays enormous attention to detail and is extremely meticulous. He prefers to receive information in small parts, but he also gives it out in the same way. And this can be very irritating to those who are used to working with the whole picture. A boss of this type thinks in terms of days, weeks, and months rather than years. Crucial, such bosses prefer to see the big picture, and they are hardly interested in details. When someone starts to go into detail, they lose patience. Such a boss is good at making long-term plans and developing overall strategies. He thinks fast because he is not distracted by unimportant details. Left hemispheric, those with a dominant left brain prefer logic and order. They are very organized and concentrated people. Once they start a job, they are sure to finish it. They prefer to work on one problem at a time. They do not like multitasking. Such bosses usually write a lot and have excellent time management skills. Right-handed, these bosses handle multiple tasks at once, using all of their many skills. The environment around them may seem chaotic. Their desk is a mess, papers are scattered everywhere. They are always nervous about deadlines. They often forget something because they do not like to make lists and prefer to keep everything in their head. And this is a big mistake, because their brain is unable to distinguish between what has already been done and what has yet to be done. Reactive, this kind of boss is thoughtful, cautious, and constantly thinking about the consequences of the decisions he makes. That's why he prefers to maintain the status quo and doesn't like to rock the boat with new ideas or plans that may turn out to be wrong. But he is excellent at responding to problems, needs and requests of his team members, although he may need so much information to make a decision or choose a course of action that his slowness pisses off subordinates. Proactive, such bosses are initiators. They love to start new projects, although they cannot always finish them before they get carried away with the next project. They are so enthusiastic about anything new that they sometimes fail to soberly evaluate alternatives, and don't pay enough attention to detail. Uniform, such bosses like everything familiar and stable and cannot tolerate change. They do not like differences, and they always notice and reject anything new. They are usually older people who have been in their position for a long time, seeking neither promotion nor novelty. They are used to their way of doing things and resist innovation. Diverse, such bosses, on the other hand, are always eager for change and new ideas. They encourage fresh approaches, always looking for different ways of working. They are in constant motion, seeking promotions and new directions in their work. These supervisors may often reorganize their team, but they are not interested in the day-to-day, routine aspects of teamwork. A test to diagnose the thinking style of your boss. Does your boss spend a lot of time completing a task, going into every detail? 1. Is your boss easily distracted? 4. Does your boss prefer to do one thing at a time? 3. Does your boss show impatience when you explain things to him or her? 2. Is your boss extra cautious? 5. Does your boss have a dislike for routine work? 8. Would you say your boss is very organized? 3. Does your boss get angry when he or she is disturbed at work? 1. Is your supervisor neat and tidy in the workplace? 3. Does your boss prefer to see the big picture, getting annoyed at the excessive amount of detail? 2. Does it require information about the smallest details of the projects you are engaged in? 1. How often does your supervisor do more than one thing at a time? 4. Does the boss pay a lot of attention to the consequences of his decisions? 5. Does he like to leave things to the last minute? 4. Does he like to have information broken down to the smallest detail? 4. Does he do well with repetitive, tedious tasks? 7. Is he fascinated by the latest technology and innovation? 8. Is he prone to reassign routine, tedious tasks to other employees? 8. Do you sometimes feel that your boss is too demanding? 1. Does he have a regular routine? 7. Is your boss forgetful and does he or she need constant reminders? 4. Does your boss have a lot of ideas? 6. Does he think long and hard before making a decision? 5. Is your boss punctual and annoyed by the tardiness of other employees? 3. Does he resist change? 7. Does he like to start new projects? 6. Is it characterized by a loss of interest in completing the task and a preoccupation with something new? 6. Does he often make long-term strategic plans? 2. Does he like to change things up all the time? 8. Don't you think your boss is sometimes incapable of assessing the consequences of his actions? 6. Does he prefer to work on existing projects rather than start new ones? 7. Don't you think he doesn't know how to make quick decisions? 5. Predominantly 1 equals detailed. Predominantly 2 equals large scale. Predominantly 3 equals left hemispheric. Predominantly 4 equals right hemispheric. Predominantly 5 equals reactive. Predominantly 6 equals proactive. Predominantly 7 equals uniform. Predominantly 8 equals variety. NB, your boss's style of thinking may fall into 2 or more categories. Tips for managing your boss according to his style of thinking. Managing a supervisor with a detailed thinking style. Provide him with information on a regular basis. Try to provide information as clearly and understandably as possible. Provide him with a lot of written clarifications and documents. Do not disturb him during work and make appointments in advance. Managing a supervisor with a large-scale thinking style. Describe the project and the work in general without going into detail. Try to handle the small details yourself. Point out the key points in the reports. Talk about long-term strategy, not day-to-day tasks. Managing a boss with a left hemispheric style of thinking. State your thoughts and ideas logically. Come to meetings on time. Follow the deadlines. Don't burden your boss with too many problems. Managing a supervisor with a right brain thinking style. Help him with his time management. Offer help when deadlines are approaching. In the documents, mark all the most important things. Gently, but often, remind him of the most important things. Managing a boss with a reactive style of thinking. Provide him with full information. Help him think through the consequences of the decisions you want him to make. Give him plenty of time and space to make decisions. Show that you took into account all the little things and accidents. Managing a boss with a proactive style of thinking. Offer him interesting new ideas. Help him complete those tasks that had time to get bored. Be passionate about his ideas. Analyze all the alternatives because he won't do it himself. Managing a supervisor with a uniform style of thinking. Point out the similarities between the new tasks and the old ones. Assist in the decision-making process by recalling previous precedents. Resist the temptation to come up with lots of new ideas. Help him cope with the change by offering a gradual change rather than a qualitative leap. Managing a boss with a diverse style of thinking. Point out the difference between new ideas and old ones. Think outside the box. Draw your boss' attention to new ideas. Respond positively to change. For more information on thinking styles, including a complete questionnaire to determine your own thinking style, contact BJA Associates Ltd, www.thinkingsriles.co.uk. This company published a book in 1999 called Thinking Styles, Attitudes That Work. Summary. Today we used two techniques to diagnose your boss. We analyzed his leadership style and his thinking style. With the leadership style questionnaire, you were able to find out whether your boss is a dictator, a bureaucrat, a charismatic person, a consultant, or a liberal. The best part is that you can use these tips to manage your boss according to his or her characteristic leadership style. However, this is only one way to diagnose. To get the full picture, we must also analyze the thinking style of your boss. This will determine whether he tends to analyze details or prefers to see the big picture, whether he is left or right brain dominant, whether he can be called reactive or proactive, whether he is attracted to uniformity and consistency or prefers differences. We advise you to write down the diagnostic type of boss defined by the tests in this chapter, and then use specific tips for communicating with a boss of this type. This way you will have all the necessary information at your disposal, and you will be able to use it in your further work with this book. You must remember that sometimes a person cannot be put into a specific category. More often than not, the character is described by 2 or 3 categories. Whatever the case, you must acquire all the knowledge you need to effectively manage your boss by meeting his expectations and needs. We'll talk about this topic tomorrow when we touch on the subject of the psychological contract. Questions, answers are at the end of the book. 1. The dictatorial boss is motivated by A. The need for power. B. Need for autonomy. C. Need for sympathy. D. The need for restraint of activity. 2. A bureaucratic boss cannot be managed. A. By providing him with material in writing. B. Adhering to the rules. C. Taking risks. D. Taking notes and notes. 3. A charismatic supervisor does not seek A. Inspire people. B. Lead by example. C. Increase the need for power. D. To inspire loyalty and devotion in subordinates. 4. A supervisor with a consultative leadership style can be managed. A. Counting on him to make the decision on his own. B. Not expressing your own opinion. C. Avoiding opportunities for off-duty communication. D. Supporting and encouraging him. 5. The liberal boss prefers A. Actively participate in the work of subordinates. B. Always know who is doing what. C. Acting on the principle of cooperation and trust. D. Not to deal with any problems. 6. It is impossible to manage a liberal boss if A. Constantly seeking his approval. B. Turn to others for support whenever possible. C. Describing problems in writing. D. Arranging formal meetings to discuss problems. 7. A supervisor with a detailed thinking style differs from a supervisor with a large-scale thinking style in that he A. Prefers to receive clearly structured documents with subheadings and paragraphs. B. Likes to be distracted from his work. C. Prefers to see the big picture rather than the small details. D. Develops long-term plans. 8. A boss with a right hemispheric thinking style more often than a boss with a left hemispheric thinking style. A. Prefers logic and order. B. Takes care of several cases at the same time. C. Keeps your desktop tidy. D. Characterized by orderliness. 9. A boss with a reactive style of thinking is more common than a boss with a proactive style of thinking. A. Starts new projects. B. Does not seek to analyze all alternatives. C. Makes impulsive decisions. D. Spends a lot of time making decisions. 10. Unlike a supervisor with a uniform style of thinking, a supervisor with a diverse style of thinking. A. Likes things to stay the same. B. Reluctant to accept new ideas. C. Doesn't like the daily grind. D. Resists new ways of working. Tuesday. Training to establish psychological contact with the boss. You and I have been analyzing your boss for 2 days, and by now you have a pretty good idea of his basic incentives. Today we are going to focus on analyzing the so-called psychological contract between him and you. You may not even realize that such a contract exists, but it forms the basis on which the relationship between subordinates and supervisors is built. A psychological contract is an unwritten and informal set of agreements about expectations that you and your supervisor consciously or unconsciously form about your job and role allocation. It differs from the more formal written contract in that it is more ambiguous and lacks commitment. However, it covers the more significant elements of the job, which is exactly what determines whether or not there is agreement between you and your supervisor. The psychological contract determines the best ways to communicate with your boss, including frequency, means, format, etc., work standards, i.e. working from home, flexible hours, etc., level of proactivity, whether your boss expects you to be proactive or reactive in working on projects. And also professional development, i.e., retraining opportunities that will provide you with key skills. At the end of the day, we will analyze ways to make psychological contact by discussing all of the above and defining mutual expectations, yours and your supervisor's. Today we will discuss the following topics: communication, progress reports on the work schedule, Level of proactivity. Professional development. How to make a psychological contract. 7. Communication. The key to managing your boss lies in meeting his expectations. Make him happy, and he will gladly make you happy. Communication is the primary motivator, and it is what can make or break your relationship with your boss. When formulating a psychological contract, you must answer the following questions. What type of communication does the boss prefer? How often does he want to communicate with you? Does he want to know about all the problems or only the most serious ones? Does he want to know about your accomplishments? How do you want to communicate with your boss? Does the supervisor expect a response to each communication? Types of communication. Your boss's preferred means of communication may depend on what you want to convey to him or her. It may be the telephone, including voicemail, personal communication on a pre-scheduled schedule, or casual conversations at the coffee machine, memos, or emails. It's important to identify your preferred tools before you start bombarding your boss with emails every day, and then find out that he doesn't look at his email at all or receives 120 emails a day. We suggest that you use the tips in Table 1. Table 1, Types of Communication. 7. Progress Reports. Let's go back to Monday to see what type your boss is. Your boss's attitude toward progress reports seems to depend on his or her leadership style and mindset. But the beauty of establishing a psychological contract is that this is an area where you don't need to make assumptions. You can just ask the boss a question. And you should, because this is the area where many bosses lose confidence in their employees because they feel that they just don't know what they're doing. When it comes to information related to the progress of projects, supervisors can be divided into 3 types. 1. A supervisor who wants to be kept informed about every step of the job. 2. A boss who only needs a finished product. 3. A supervisor who needs to be informed from time to time. 7. At the stage of establishing a psychological contract, find out what type your supervisor belongs to. This is the only way you will be able to meet his expectations. Once you understand how often the supervisor wants to communicate with subordinates, you must determine your preferred means of communication, and for progress reports, this means may differ from those for other types of communication. For example, many supervisors who use email for day-to-day communication prefer to receive progress reports in official typed form. Schedule of work. If your official contract does not stipulate the working hours absolutely specifically, and many jobs today do not have strictly defined working hours, and many experienced workers today work on a flexible schedule, this should be reflected in your psychological contract. As new work schedules become more and more popular, you may need to clarify everything in advance and agree on answers to the following questions. Do I have to come into the office at exactly the right time in the morning? Do I have to be at my desk at a specific time? Will I have to stay late after work, and if so, how often? Will I have to work weekends? Is a flexible schedule possible for me? Will I be able to work from home, and, if so, how often? If I am not in the workplace, i.e., meeting with a client, do I have to report where I am? Do I have to report my movements in advance? 7. It should be emphasized that most of these questions should not be asked directly, because the boss will not be able to answer them immediately and frankly. You will have to look for answers to them in the process of forming a psychological contract, which we will talk about later. In addition, the exact questions may be far from complete. For example, the boss may say that it is not necessary to stay late after work, but deep down he is much more sympathetic to those employees who do not rush home. Your job is to get true answers, not formal ones. You should be aware of all the work schedule problems listed in Table 2 at the time of forming your psychological contract. See also tomorrow's piece on how to impress your boss. Table 2. Schedule of work. 7.7. Level of proactivity. How proactive does your boss expect you to be? And do his expectations coincide with the level you are willing to go to in your work? The answers to these questions need to be found as part of the psychological contract. Some supervisors expect employees to sit in their compartments and wait to be assigned something. Such supervisors do not encourage creativity and innovation. More often than not, they operate in areas where routine make up the lion's share of work. On the other hand, more and more managers count on the activity of their subordinates. They want their subordinates to find things to do or ways to improve things. Similarly, some employees wait quietly for something to be assigned to them and are not going to be proactive at all. Others feel that this situation stifles their creativity. Set the level of proactivity that your boss expects. And here's what those levels are. Level 1. Total reactivity. Your boss expects you to do only assigned tasks. No need to be proactive. Level 2. Reluctant proactivity. A supervisor allows you to be proactive only after completing assigned tasks. Level 3. Partial proactivity. Such a supervisor encourages proactivity, although most of the work is assigned tasks that must be completed without fail. Level 4. Overwhelmingly proactive. In such a situation, the supervisor expects you to look for work on your own and only occasionally perform the tasks assigned to you. Very often the supervisor does not speak frankly about his expectations. This is why the psychological contract is of particular value. It helps to translate uncertain expectations to a conscious level. Professional development. The concept of the psychological contract is most widespread in the sphere of personal professional development. Initially, the very idea of the psychological contract was related to the expectations of employees from employers. In the field of career development, I will work better for you, and in return you will give me stability, career prospects and skills that will make me attractive to other companies. That contract has changed dramatically lately as people have stopped working in one place all their lives. There are constant layoffs. We live in an era of globalization, and competition from new markets is ever more intense. And now a new kind of psychological contract is needed. The employee himself takes responsibility for his own career growth, and the employer provides him with the retraining and experience necessary for market attractiveness. It is very important that your boss agrees to help you continue your professional development. You, on your part, should identify gaps in your skills, knowledge or experience and seek opportunities to fill those gaps. The goal of your psychological contract is to get your supervisor to agree to take advantage of such opportunities by attending retraining courses, completing new tasks, or learning new skills. Formulation of the psychological contract. Now that you and I know what a psychological contract should consist of, we can switch to developing or formulating such a contract. It is important to remember that a psychological contract differs from an ordinary contract in the following ways. He is not specific. It is rarely concluded in writing. He's very informal. It can't be articulated before you start or even within the first few weeks. It is not mandatory. There is no legal element to it. The process of formulating a psychological contract can begin when you start a new job. But it can also be started at any other time. Be guided by the following tips. How to formulate a psychological contract. Step 1. Begin by listing the aspects that need clarification or questions you need answers to. To do this, use the material we just discussed. You may have to make a chart or just list the questions on a piece of paper. Highlight the following aspects: communication, see list of questions above, progress reports, work schedule, see list of questions above, and a level of proactivity. Then make your own notes next to each item when you get answers. Try to get all the answers in no more than 3 months. Step 2. Start filling out your chart or looking for answers to questions by asking or simply observing. Some questions are worth discussing with your supervisor, while others can be explained to you by colleagues who have worked there longer or know your supervisor better. There are also questions that can be answered simply by observing your boss's behavior and recognizing his or her expectations. Step 3. Once you've finished drafting your psychological contract, constantly analyze it. Expectations change, especially in today's turbulent business world. New employees, new technology, and new work schedules are emerging, all of which means that the psychological contract needs to be revised. Summary. By the end of today, you should understand exactly that the secret to managing your boss is to meet his expectations as accurately as possible. Give him what he needs in terms of communication, accountability, and performance. This is the best way to establish a perfect working relationship. And at the heart of this method is the psychological contract. To create it, you have to turn into a real detective, ask your colleagues, or rely on your own observations. This is the only way to understand how the boss feels about the duration of the working day, the frequency of receiving reports, and the activity of employees. Usually the stage of active information gathering begins on the very first day at the new place. But it can be started at almost any moment. It is never too late to draw up a psychological contract. And when you make a clear list of expectations, you'll immediately understand how you can make the best impression on your boss. Tomorrow we'll talk to you about how to use your new knowledge to impress your boss. Questions. You will find the answers at the end of the book. 1. Psychological contracts are: A. Agreements in writing. B. Agreements that are legally binding. C. Informal agreements. D. Agreements that are made within 12 weeks of starting a new job. 2. Telephone communication is best for: A. Discussions of complex problems. B. Communicating your accomplishments to your supervisor. C. Solutions to problems that require a long discussion. D. Discussions of problems that require an immediate response. 3. Email is not suitable for: A. Requests that do not require an immediate response. B. Informing the supervisor about the progress of the work. C. Communicating your accomplishments to your supervisor. D. Discussions of complex problems. 4. Disadvantages of working from home include: tick as many boxes as you see fit. A. Invisibility of work to management. B. Inaccessibility of networking opportunities. C. Difficulty of control by management. D. Insulation. 5. Reluctant proactivity means that A. Your boss only allows you to be active when you finish your assigned tasks. B. A supervisor expects you to do only assigned tasks. C. The boss expects you to make up most of your own work. D. Some of the tasks you get from your supervisor, and some of them you make up for yourself. 6. The communication section of the psychological contract should contain the following information. Tick as many boxes as you deem necessary. A. Analysis of the supervisor's handwriting. B. Description of the supervisor's preferred method and means of communication. C. Information about the frequency of communication. D. A description of the type of communication you expect to have with your supervisor. 7. The means of communicating with a supervisor should rarely include A. Email. B. Phone. C. Meetings. D. Facebook. 8. You must report to your supervisor about the progress of the work. A. When he asks about it. B. Weekly. C. According to his preferences. D. Daily. 9. Recycling is something that A. What should I do sometimes? B. What I should never do. C. What to ask when developing a psychological contract. D. Something to take for granted. 10. In modern conditions. A. I can still count on the stability of the work. B. I can still count on a supervisor to guide my career development. C. I can still count on my supervisor to allow me to take appropriate retraining. D. I can count on my supervisor to find retraining opportunities for me. Wednesday. Learning to impress the boss. Many people mistakenly believe that you should not try too hard to impress your boss and not appear to be a sycophant, going out of his way to impress him. But in order to impress your boss, you don't have to look him in the mouth, flatter him shamelessly, or laugh at unfunny jokes. You need to impress with your talents, skills, and abilities. You already know the basic stimuli that affect your boss, that is, you know what will impress him or her and what will go unnoticed. So today we're going to talk about how to meet those expectations. And then you begin to really manage your boss, because if the impression is favorable, the boss will want to encourage you. For example, a more interesting job or a pay raise. So when you impress your boss, you are actually taking care of your own career development. Today we will analyze the ways in which you can impress your boss from day one. It's not just the first impression that should shine, but also the impression of each day you work. Demonstrate professionalism and understanding, and don't forget the role of body language signals, nonverbal communication, and emotion management. Then you will be able to make the most favorable impression on any manager. Today we are going to talk about the following. How to make a good first impression. Important body language signals. Emotion management. Professionalism. 7. Creating a good first impression. First impressions are everything. People form ideas about people, events, and things instantly, because they simply don't have time to think seriously before making a decision. And the decision about whether we like what we see or not can remain for a long time, and it can be very difficult to change it. And that means that if your first interaction with your boss turns out to be negative, it will take a lot of effort to change that impression. No matter what you do, a negative first impression will ruin everything. But a good first impression is a great start. All your subsequent actions and results will be perceived even more positively, all thanks to a good first impression. Psychologists call it the halo or horn effect. You need to achieve the halo effect, which will illuminate all your actions and results with its positive light. But if you achieve the effect of horns, then even the most positive results will be perceived negatively. You can create a halo effect from the moment of acquaintance or the first meeting with your boss. Follow the tips in Table 3. Table 3, Tips for creating a halo effect when meeting your boss for the first time. 7. Body language. What we say is sometimes less important than how we say it. The tone of our body language can give away our true feelings, and understanding body language signals and submitting to them can make a first impression extremely positive. The two main situations in which you can truly use body language signals are meetings and office work. Take advantage of the tips in Table 4. Table 4, Body language in the office. 7.7. Controlling emotions. Few people understand what emotion management is all about. There are even fewer who know how to use it to manage their supervisor. However, it is one of the most powerful and effective management techniques available to you. Emotion management is a conscious attempt to control the emotions projected onto those around you. Most of us use this technique periodically in our work and daily lives. Here are a few examples. We laugh at the boss's unfunny joke. We show sympathy when we learn of a colleague's troubles, even though deep down we don't care about him. We listen with false enthusiasm to stories about the achievements of our friends' children. We hide our boredom from the annoyed customer. These are all examples of emotion management, almost unconscious acts that are an important part of human social interaction. By managing and controlling the emotional background that we project onto others, we facilitate communication, help people relax, and give them exactly the impression of ourselves that we need. Imagine how unpopular you would become if you never tried to manage your emotions. The 3 steps below should help you learn how to manage your emotions to make a favorable impression on your boss. Step 1. Identifying the emotions you need to impress your boss. To impress your boss through emotion management, you have to do everything that we do in normal life, but go one step further. To begin with, you need to recognize and understand what emotions will really be able to impress him. It's worth noting that such actions involve 2 types of emotional displays that are best avoided in the workplace. These are 1. Negative emotions, anger, frustration, jealousy, etc. 2. Excessive demonstration of emotions, tears, tantrums, inappropriate joy. So first you have to make sure that you are able to control your emotions and avoid such outbursts. And that means that even if your boss makes you mad, or if you win the lottery and the winnings are not so great as to allow you to quit your job, you have to take a sober and balanced approach to your own emotional background. Of course, you will have to suppress and hide your true feelings from time to time. It is inevitable. Some people find this unnecessary, and they live by the principle of what you see is what you get. Yes, that's fair, but you can't impress your boss that way. So, we have found out that there are some emotions that will not impress the boss. But what are these emotions? Studies have shown that most bosses and supervisors most want to see enthusiasm and interest in their employees. When you demonstrate your enthusiasm to your boss, you show your own interest, hard work, dedication to the interests of the company, love of work, and ambition. And the simplest act of emotion management is enough for all this. Of course, it will take more than one such action. To be truly effective, you have to manage your emotions all the time. So how do you demonstrate enthusiasm and interest? Smile when you see your boss or get another assignment from him. Take on a new job with enthusiasm, without showing that you don't want it at all. Be positive about ideas and projects, hide your negative attitude. Call for a new job. Ask pertinent questions. However, caution should be exercised in two respects. 1. Don't go overboard with emotional enthusiasm. Enthusiasm and interest are valuable qualities, but constant wide smiles at the sight of your boss and boundless enthusiasm for even the most unpleasant and meaningless tasks, as well as perpetual readiness to take on any task, will not make you popular with your colleagues, and your boss may seem suspicious. Such behavior may make you appear to him as an annoying sycophant. 2. Enthusiasm should not only be demonstrated to your boss. If you constantly switch back and forth, you will appear insincere and fake, rather than interested in enthusiasm. To demonstrate enthusiasm, you have to really feel it. Then you won't be accused of being fake or trying to manipulate. And then you have to learn to generate enthusiasm even when you don't really feel it. Step 2. Learn to imitate and hide. The emotions you need in order to impress your boss are not necessarily those that you really feel. Sometimes you will have to imitate enthusiasm, even though you don't want to. And sometimes you will need to hide your irritation. Consider the following scenarios. You are busy with personal problems and worrying about them. You are depressed because of a quarrel with your partner. You're worried about your health. You have been passed over for promotion. Your colleague was assigned an assignment that should have been yours. The buyer pissed you off. The boss wants your opinion on a project you are not interested in. Your car broke down and you were late for a meeting. The customer has just been rude to you. You don't feel well. These situations happen all the time. And at such moments it can be very difficult to show the required emotions, and at the same time to hide your true feelings. However, if you want to impress your boss and subsequently control him, you have to imitate a lot. Here are two approaches to this kind of emotional play, and they are both rooted in professional acting. Superficial acting, professional actors call it technical acting. It consists of preparing physical reactions so that they reflect the emotion you want to demonstrate. With this approach, there is no need to try to experience the desired emotion. But a physical reaction can evoke a feeling associated with it. For example, smiling evokes joy because the very act of smiling causes physiological and chemical changes in the brain, that is, it makes us happy. Deep acting, professional actors call it acting according to Stanislavski's system. The actor in this situation is trying to experience the emotion he needs to demonstrate. In other words, with this approach, you are really trying to feel enthusiasm. The founder of the system, Stanislavski, advised you to use the technique of emotional memory, that is, to recall a life experience or an occasion when you actually experienced the desired emotion in the past. This recollection will help you to experience the same emotion now. Both approaches are good, although you have to be a bit of an actor for each. My research has shown that most people hide or mimic emotion in about a third of workplace communications. And that allows us to impress our bosses and get ahead in our careers. However, if you start hiding and imitating emotions all the time, it's time to reevaluate. You may never be enthusiastic about your job, and you may not like your boss at all. In such circumstances, it is very difficult to manage a boss without discovering the root cause of your own job dissatisfaction. On Saturday, you and I will discuss common problems, and perhaps it will help you to understand yourself. Step 3. Analyze the emotional culture at work. A true emotion management specialist who knows how to impress management goes beyond just showing enthusiasm and interest. He goes further. He analyzes the emotional culture of his organization in order to tailor his own emotional behavior to it. The emotional culture of an organization includes unwritten rules about which emotions should be displayed and which should be concealed, and these rules vary from organization to organization and from field to field. In more creative organizations, freer emotional expression is acceptable. Here it is possible to demonstrate emotional extremes that would, at best, cause bewilderment in another company. On the other hand, in some emotional cultures, employees are not required to show any emotion, even enthusiasm. For more on managing emotions, see my book, Hiding How We Feel, Faking What We Don't Feel, Element. Professionalism. What does it mean to be a professional? A professional is distinguished by the ability to adequately perform her work at such a high level that justifies not only your salary, but also its increase. Professionalism is attention to details that shows that you care about your work and do not want to cause trouble and inconvenience to anyone, including yourself. Professionalism allows you to show your supervisor your abilities. That is why this quality is the key one in managing a boss. If the boss trusts and relies on you, she is more likely to encourage you with additional responsibility and promotion. To become a true professional, you have to be attentive not only to your work, but also to everything else. Appearance. In general, you should strive not to look like a student who came to work a little in his spare time. You should have a neat hairstyle, ironed clothes. Choose clothes in a classic, not trendy style. Do not get carried away with obviously unnecessary details, striking jewelry and strong flavors. You should give the impression of a hard-working person who is not absorbed in his own appearance so that there is no time for work. In addition, the boss must be sure that you will make a good impression on clients and customers, even if they show up unexpectedly. Of course, your clothing depends on the dress code of your office. Like the emotional culture we talked about earlier, the dress code varies in all organizations. Creative industries tend to dress casually, but traditional offices have a stricter dress code. To look professional, try dressing in the same style as your boss. Dress for the job you dream of, not the one you have. Time management. The ability to clearly allocate your time is vital for a true professional. If you have time management skills, you have no problem with the following. Timely submission of reports. Handing over work on time. Informing the supervisor of the progress of the work at any time when he needs this information. Punctuality in meetings and appointments. By coming to work on time. Accuracy in estimating the duration of work on projects. All this is a sign of professionalism. Improving your time management skills is facilitated by the following. The ability to prioritize so that first to finish the most urgent and important and only then what you want. Delegating responsibility, if possible. Know how not to interrupt. A huge amount of time is spent talking to colleagues and on the phone. If you need to complete your work by a certain deadline, either include break times in your estimate in advance, or include voicemail and put a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the office door. Clear organization of documents and storage systems. Keeping lists and schedules to know exactly what needs to be done and not to forget anything. Realistic assessment of the duration of the work. You should not make promises that you cannot keep, and take on work for which you do not have enough time. A desk can either reinforce the impression of you as a professional or completely destroy it. It speaks volumes about professionalism. A clean table with nothing extra on it. A document tray system that shows a large amount of completed work. A minimum of personal items on the table, for example, photographs. Adequate selection of decorative elements. A flower in a pot is fine, but mouse pads with funny pictures or unusual handles are not too much to the face of a professional. Presenting the work. The look of your work speaks volumes about your professionalism. It's not enough to deliver your work on time and to a high quality. Your work must look professional. The presentation of your work should be a halo that illuminates and reinforces the good impression of its content. See about the halo above. Make your work look professional in the following ways. The work must be done flawlessly. Check everything several times. Avoid spelling and grammatical errors, as well as typos. Put all reports in professional-looking folders. Use different font colors wisely during presentations and in reports. Summary. By the end of today, you learned that a good impression begins with body language signals. We discussed handshakes, small talk, dress, and posture. And now you know how to create the right impression in the office and in business meetings. Hand in hand with body language comes emotion control. And today we saw how controlling and managing the emotional background we project to colleagues, managers, and clients can improve our relationships with those around us. By learning the 3 steps we talked about today, you can make emotion management an integral part of all work relationships. Part of the skills discussed today fall within the realm of social acting. I suppose it has become clear to you that managing emotions sometimes requires superficial or profound acting. However, to make a really good impression, acting alone is not enough. It is very important to be a real professional at work. The concept of professionalism varies from organization to organization, but almost everywhere the possession of time management skills, an adequate appearance, and the ability to present your work well are valued. By incorporating all of these elements into your work life, you can make a very favorable impression on your boss even if sometimes you have to fake it a little. Questions. You will find the answers at the end of the book. 1. The halo or horn effect is A. The long-term effect of the positive or negative first impression you make. B. The effect of the firmness of your handshake. C. Smiling or frowning eyebrows when meeting someone. D. Positive or negative language used in conversation. 2. A good handshake should A. Consist of at least 3 shakes of the hand. B. Include turning one's hand, palm down, over the palm of the interlocutor. C. To be carried out with both hands. D. Be firm, short, and accompanied by a smile. 3. The office should A. Always sit with arms and legs crossed. B. Stand with hands on hips. C. Try to make your posture open. D. Copying his supervisor's every move. 4. You can make a good impression in business meetings if A. Holding a pen in your hand. B. Distractedly scribbling with a pen on paper. C. Lean back in your chair with your hands behind your head. D. Drumming your fingers on the table. 5. What emotions should be avoided in the workplace? A. Interest. B. Rage. C. Enthusiasm. D. Pleasure. 6. How should you not show enthusiasm and interest? A. With a smile. B. Positive attitude towards ideas and projects. C. Voluntary consent to an assignment. D. Jokes. 7. How not to imitate emotions at work. A. By practicing an appropriate facial expression. B. Thinking about something that might evoke the necessary emotion. C. Recall a situation in which you experienced a necessary emotion. D. Pretend that you are experiencing this particular emotion. 8. A professional is someone who A. Adequately performs his or her job. B. Whenever necessary, it is done with something. C. Draws attention to details. D. Pretends to be very interested in his work. 9. Quality time management skills mean that you must A. Complete the work on time. B. Be punctual with business meetings and appointments. C. Be able to correctly estimate the duration of work. D. Do as much work as possible on your own and not rely on other people. 10. A professional work table should look like this. A. There should be a lot of papers on it that emphasize your busyness. B. Personal items on the table should be kept to a minimum. C. It should have a lot of funny objects on it. D. There should be many trays of documents on it that show how much work you need to do. Thursday. Finding out how to get more out of your manager. Today we're going to talk about how to get more out of your boss. You've already come a long way in being able to manage your boss, but so far it's been general talk. Managing your boss effectively means that you can ask for and get more because, let's face it, by now you've proven your worth and importance. Many people find it very difficult to tell their bosses that they are not happy with the way things are, whether it's about pay, promotion, or workload. Because of this, they have to put up with excessive workloads, boring tasks, tedious work, low pay, and denial of promotion. But hopefully by now you've gained confidence in your ability to impress your boss and push the boundaries a bit. The main reason we are often afraid to ask for something at work is that we simply don't know our rights, and we doubt the credibility of our arguments. Today we will discuss these very issues. Once we have the basics figured out, we can discuss how to ask for a raise, more interesting work, and less work. So, today you and I are going to focus on more specific problems you need to solve in order to get more out of your boss. These problems include requests for a raise, requests for promotion, requests for more interesting work, requests to reduce the load. Why do we put up with the status quo at work? 7. Before we discuss these problems, we should answer the question of why many people simply cannot ask their boss for what they need. Most often people put up with the status quo at work for the following reasons. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want my boss to think I'm lazy and disinterested, and if I start complaining about overwork, that's exactly what he'll think. The boss appreciates enthusiasts. If I start complaining, I'll seem like a winner to him. I have to manage, don't I? If I ask to reduce my workload, I'll be deemed incapable. I can't ask for a promotion because since the boss hasn't promoted me yet, it means he doesn't think I deserve it. Maybe I'm really not good enough to be promoted. Such statements and feelings demonstrate a lack of self-confidence and ignorance of one's basic rights. To get more out of your boss, you need to become more confident and persuasive at work. How to become confident at work? The first step to job confidence is understanding and appreciating employee rights. These rights include the following: the right to fair payment for work performed, the right to perform tasks that match your qualifications, and to refuse tasks that do not match your qualifications, the right to a private life outside of work, the right to equal opportunity, the right to not be threatened, insulted, or harassed at work, the right to work in conditions that are not harmful to physical and mental health. In addition to these basic moral rights, every employee also has legal rights. These include the following: the right to not be unfairly dismissed, the right to return to the same job after maternity leave, the right not to be discriminated against on the basis of disability, gender, or race, the right to postpartum leave, the right to free time, unpaid, for community service, example, jury duty and union activities, the right to free time to look for a new job or retraining in case of redundancy, the right to be notified in writing of the reasons for dismissal, the right to receive a detailed payslip, the right to withdraw from a violated employment contract, the right to be paid not less than the statutory minimum wage. Sources: UK Department of Labour and Industry, UK Conciliation and Arbitration Advisory Service. If you are able to understand that you, as well as your co-workers and, of course, your boss, have these rights, you are already halfway to asserting them. More often than not, employees are embarrassed to ask their boss for more because they don't know their basic rights. Thus, if you understand that you have a right to a personal life outside of work, it's easier to let you complain about overtime on your days off. Similarly, if you know you have a right to work under conditions that are not harmful to your health, it will be easier for you to complain about workplace stresses. Of course, it's one thing to understand that you can ask your boss for more, but it's quite another to do it in practice. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. How to ask for a raise. Pay raise. Before you think about asking for a raise, stop and ask yourself the important question: do I deserve it? The question may seem strange to you, but many people mistakenly ask for a raise for all the wrong reasons. These include the following: my colleague got a raise, so I can count on that, too. I've been with the company a long time. My friend who works for another company gets more than me. I just had a baby, I need more money. None of these reasons are in any way related to the value you provide to the company, and therefore are not a good reason to increase your salary. Good reasons for an increase above the rate of inflation include the following: my responsibilities have expanded, and they must be paid accordingly. I have to work longer hours because my workload has increased, and not because I'm slow. I saved the company a lot of money. I was able to cut costs thanks to my proposal. I have to work after hours. I have to go on business trips and spend a lot of time away from home. I've learned important new skills and upgraded my skills so I can bring more value to the company. Once you are sure that your reason can be considered compelling, you need to determine how to direct your supervisor to agree to the request. The best strategy is to present logical, compelling arguments and present them either as a written report or as a verbal presentation. Either way, you need to make an appointment with your supervisor. If your company has a performance appraisal system, it is best to begin this conversation at that point. If there is no performance appraisal system, you can offer such a system for yourself. An annual analysis of your strengths and weaknesses in order to identify the need for retraining, prospects for promotion, etc. When you meet with your boss, behave according to our advice, which will noticeably increase your chances of success. Don't make threats. Employees often make the mistake of saying, "If I don't get a raise, I'll be forced to look for another job." Don't say anything like that if you're not going to do any of that. You can only say that if you really have a place to go. Many supervisors are annoyed by such threats, and they may agree to your offer. Don't demand it. You have the right to ask for a raise, but not to demand one. Nothing irritates a boss more than feeling compelled to do something. Remain calm. Worrying about a request is perfectly natural. After all, your well-being is at stake. Calmness and common sense will help you succeed, irritability and emotionality will not. Of course, there is always the possibility that the boss will say no, despite all the cogency and fairness of your arguments. Perhaps the boss does not think you deserve a raise, or maybe the company just does not have the money. In the first case, you need to figure out what you can do to become more deserving. In the latter, ask your boss to revisit the issue in, say, 6 months. But in both cases, you need to make sure that no is not the final answer. Many bosses refuse a raise for another reason. If I give you a raise, I'll have to give your coworkers a raise, too. This is an unconvincing reason, and you should make it clear that you are speaking only for yourself and in no way intend to discuss your salary with anyone else. How to ask for a promotion. Promotion. Many of the problems associated with asking for a raise are similar to those associated with asking for a raise. However, promotion issues require special attention. 2 scenarios are possible. 1. There is a certain vacancy that you would like to fill. 2. There is no vacancy, you just want to move up the career ladder. These scenarios require a different approach to talking to a supervisor. When there is a vacancy, for example, when an older employee retires and his position becomes vacant, you need to convince the boss that not only are you suitable for the higher position, but that you are also better suited for it than anyone else. More and more often, the vacancies are looked for on the side, so you will have to compete with an unknown opponent as well. The first step is to go to your supervisor to stake out the plot. Follow our advice. As soon as the vacancy becomes known, and it may be even before the colleague leaves, meet with your boss and explain why you think you are the most suitable candidate. Use all arguments and evidence that you can handle the job. Don't forget to specify why you want the position so badly. Never criticize someone who has held the position before. If you have any ideas for change or improvement, present them in a way that does not make them seem like an attack on your predecessor. At this point, you will probably receive some comments about your request. Hopefully, they will be positive. Perhaps you will be invited or advised to apply in writing, as all other applicants do. Since this scenario is very likely, some people go over their supervisor's head and apply on their own. This is a mistake. Since your supervisor is likely to be asked about your qualifications, it is worth getting his support in advance. If you consult with him, he is more likely to support your candidacy. 7. But what to do if the signals from your boss are not positive at all? Try to find out the reasons, and then, if necessary, you can do something about it. Perhaps your boss doesn't think you're ready for this kind of responsibility, or he feels that you lack certain skills and experience. Whatever he or she thinks you lack, you have the opportunity to ask for retraining or a job that will help you fill in the gaps. If you think your supervisor's opinion of you is fair, you shouldn't rush into applying for a promotion. But let's assume that the opinion of your boss seems unfair and false to you. What should you do in this case? Suppose your boss claims that you have not shown managerial ability, but you know very well that you have been managing the entire department for a month while he or she was on vacation. In such a situation, you need to tactfully point out your merits. Certainly you shouldn't declare to your supervisor, "You're so wrong." Ask if he or she knows of any appreciation for your efforts in leading the department that month. Explain how interesting the job was to you. Tell them that you feel ready for more. If you can't convince your boss in any way, it may be worth trying to convince someone else from another company, that is, try to look for another job in a position you deserve. However, you should keep in mind that it will probably be your boss who will be asking for references. So why would your boss deny you a promotion even if you have all the skills and experience you need? Of course, there is always the possibility that he is right and that you are overestimating your capabilities. On the other hand, sometimes it also happens that the boss deliberately holds you back. Either he does not want to lose you, or he sees you as a threat to himself. It is very difficult to fight under such conditions. If you feel that this is the situation, you should think about jumping ship. Consider whether there is not another person in the company who could give you a reference. If there is no specific job opening in the company, all of the above still applies, but your situation is a little better. You don't have to wait for someone to leave. The best time to ask for a promotion is at your annual report or when you've completed retraining in which you've learned an important skill or upgraded your skills. If you get a denial, figure out what you need to do to make sure your request is granted next time. And be sure to do it. How to ask for an interesting job. Many people get stuck in their old jobs for a long time, simply because they are waiting for their boss to give them something more interesting. Don't wait. Ask for more interesting work, showing your enthusiasm and conscientiousness. Most managers like that. The best advice in this situation is to be proactive and always look for the most interesting assignments you can get. You may be able to relieve your boss of an unnecessary workload or come up with an interesting idea. Or maybe you should take on something that no one else in the office wants to do. Here are some useful tips. To show your abilities, do something, even a mere trifle, and show the results to your boss. If you want to learn a new skill that will help you get a more interesting job, observe a more experienced colleague and copy his techniques. Ask for a referral to a refresher course to get a more interesting job in the future. Spend time in the company of those whose work you are interested. You can learn a lot from them during informal conversations over lunch. Always ask for a specific job. You shouldn't vaguely complain that your work isn't interesting enough. Be realistic. Don't try to run until you learn to walk. There's no point in asking to be made editor of a press release if you've never written anything like it. How to complain about overloading. Many readers must have gone straight to this very section, since overloading has become a very common problem. But what does excessive mean? One can speak of excessive strain if you have to stay late at work all the time. You have to take work home all the time. You feel pressure and stress all the time. You never have time for lunch. Overwork is potentially a very serious problem because it is a strong source of stress in the workplace. And stress leads to a lowered immune system, which is why you've become plagued with perpetual colds, flu, and other illnesses. Remember your rights and take action. Make an appointment with your boss and present him or her with a timesheet that notes your hours of work and tasks completed over the past month. By doing so, you show that you really do have too much work. Explain that you are prepared to work overtime occasionally, for example, when a project deadline approaches or an important order needs to be fulfilled. But you can't work that way all the time. If you can offer a solution to a problem, do so. Doing so shows that the company's interests are just as important to you as your own. For example, some of your work could simply be cut back or delegated to someone else. Perhaps some types of work are just unnecessary and pointless. Of course, there is the possibility that the company simply needs to expand its staff, which in the current climate is not the most desirable opening for management. And in conclusion, don't put up with constant overwork at work. It can be detrimental to your health. If your boss doesn't want to help you, it makes sense to think about moving to another job. Summary. Today you learned how to get more out of your boss in the 4 most important areas: how to ask for a raise, a promotion, a more interesting job, and a reduced workload. To do this, you must be aware of your position at work and give yourself permission to stand up for your rights if they are not respected. It is sometimes easier for us to not rock the boat and not ask for more. But for self-respect and respect from your boss, you should make your requests if there is reason to do so. You must be aware of your importance and have a good reason for asking for a raise or promotion. Having a good reason is the first step. By the end of today, you should have learned how to use strategies for asking your boss. Remember, you can't threaten to quit if you're not actually going to do it. Of course, even all of the techniques described in this section are no guarantee of success. Your boss may not be willing to meet you halfway, and all your efforts will go to waste. Tomorrow we will discuss this situation: communicating with a difficult boss. Questions. You will find the answers at the end of the book. 1. Which of the following are you entitled to at work? A. The right to finish work at 5 p.m. each day. B. The right to never work on weekends. C. The right to have good colleagues. D. The right to a private life outside of work. 2. My legal rights at work do not include: A. The right to be paid at least the minimum wage. B. The right to terminate a violated employment contract. C. The right to be paid for time off to do union work. D. The right not to be unjustly dismissed. 3. A good reason for asking for a raise is: A. My colleague got a raise, so I should get a raise, too. B. I have been with this company for a very long time. C. I have a wider range of responsibilities. D. I have a family, and I need more money. 4. When asking for a raise, I have to: A. Make it clear that if I don't get what I want, I will quit. B. Remain calm. C. Trying to get my boss to admit that I deserve a raise. D. Show your irritation at not getting the raise you deserve. 5. When an interesting vacancy arises, I have to A. Explain to my supervisor why I am the best person for the job. B. Explain why I am so much better than the person who held the position before. C. Don't flaunt your abilities, it won't do any good. D. Not to discuss the matter with your supervisor, but simply to apply. 6. If I want to get a more interesting job, I have to A. Patiently waiting for my boss to give me an interesting job. B. To complain to my boss that my work is not interesting enough. C. Ask for referrals to retraining or refresher courses. D. Telling everyone around me that my qualifications are too high for such a simple job. 7. Which of the following does not indicate that you suffer from an excessive workload? A. You are bored at work. B. You constantly have to stay late at work or take work home. C. You never have time for lunch. D. You are under constant stress and pressure. 8. Work overload is a very serious problem because A. She is a constant source of stress. B. You always miss the convenient train home. C. You cannot use your skills. D. You cannot get a promotion. 9. A good reason not to complain about overloading is as follows. A. You only have to recycle at certain times of the year. B. I don't want my boss to think I'm not committed enough. C. Complaints are a sign of lack of enthusiasm. D. The boss will think I'm incapable of doing my job. 10. Which of the following is not a good reason to try to get more out of your boss? A. This will help me get ahead. B. It will be good for my career. C. They will respect me more. D. I am entitled to more. Friday. Mastering techniques for taming a difficult boss. By this point, you already possess a host of tools and skills that will help you get more out of your boss, to impress him or her and to work in a way that best meets his or her expectations and needs. However, all the skills you have mastered will only help you if your boss is a reasonable and calm person who wants to establish a good working relationship with you as much as you do. But what do you do if you are clearly unlucky enough to have a boss? How to manage a boss who literally came out of hell? Perhaps your boss doesn't want to listen to the voice of reason, behaves selfishly, suffers from an inferiority complex, is spiteful, arrogant, vindictive, or even violent. Such a boss is unlikely to respond to the techniques we discussed earlier. He doesn't care about the psychological contract, Tuesday, or impression management, Wednesday. If you are so unlucky with your boss, you will have to take more drastic steps. And today we're going to discuss how to deal with the 3 worst types of bosses. A boss with a penchant for harassment. A boss prone to sexual harassment. A boss who takes credit for the work of his subordinates. Is your boss prone to harassment? 7. Before we begin discussing how to deal with a harassing boss, we need to define what harassment is. At what point does an irritable, rude supervisor turn to harassment? One researcher, Andrea Adams, 1992, defines harassment as constant criticism and personal insults, public and private, that degrade a person and rob him of his sense of self-worth, gradually destroying his personality. The Manufacturing, Science and Finance Union of Great Britain states that workplace harassment is persistent, abusive, harassing, intimidating, malicious and intolerable behavior, Abuse of authority or unfair punishment that makes a person anxious, threatened and vulnerable, and also humiliates, deprives one of dignity and subjects one to stress. IDS Employment Law Supplement No. 76, 1996. Generally, a supervisor can be described as prone to harassment if he or she does not hold back his anger at the team as a whole or at a particular employee, unfairly attacks you and or other employees, humiliates you in front of other people, makes you do things you don't want to do or insists that you do things the way he sees fit, makes you abandon your own plans, that is, forces you to stay at work against your will. He uses his power. He can fire you if you don't do what he wants. Always criticizing you, mocking you. It belittles your accomplishments, unreasonably rejects your requests, sets unrealistic deadlines, yells at you or other employees. When determining whether your supervisor is prone to harassment, exercise caution. A person does not have to exhibit all of these attributes, but still, his or her behavior is more likely to be called offensive than acceptable. But if your supervisor's complaints about you and your work are reasonable and valid, you should not consider him or her harassing. Is it serious? If you really think your boss is prone to harassment, the situation is very serious. Some people think this kind of behavior is perfectly normal. It's the result of daily pressure and hard work. They argue that bosses simply do not have time to shrug, they need to shout and demand. Only then will the work get done. But there is a serious difference between an intolerant boss who is stressed and a boss who is prone to harassment. You will probably feel that a supervisor is prone to it without using the above description. Studies show that workplace harassment can lead to serious health problems. You may have already experienced the following symptoms: a feeling of great stress, recurrent colds and minor infections, depression and other mental health problems, inability to cope with work, fear of work. In fact, workplace harassment should be taken very seriously. It has long been established that it is a serious contributor to occupational stress, potentially dangerous to both parties and to production in general. IRS Employment Trends 1992, 2. According to a 1997 study by Charlotte Rayner of Staffordshire University, a quarter of working adults had experienced some degree of workplace harassment. Another study found that about 40 million working days are lost each year in Britain, and only because of workplace harassment. Lupoidevan 1996. Why is your boss prone to harassment? Psychologists and researchers have spent a great deal of effort and time trying to understand why people exhibit a tendency to stalk. Several different theories have been put forward. Children's theory of persuasive beliefs. In 1997, Randall put forward the following theory. To understand why adults are prone to harassment, it must be understood that most of them have learned as children that harassment brings positive results. For some, workplace stalking is an attempt to come to terms with the abuse they experienced as children. Crawford and Adams, 1992. For others, this behavior is an effort to gain the love or attention of parents, reflecting parental indifference and neglect. Such people resort to harassment without even becoming bosses. For them, violence is not a means of control, but a way to get what they want. Jealousy/threat theory. Other psychologists believe that the primary motivator of harassment is envy. A boss prone to harassment begins to harass individual employees for a variety of reasons, the main ones being the victim's popularity among colleagues, success, achievement, efficiency, organizational experience, and excellent social skills. Alexandra, 1995-30. Such a boss feels threatened by a promising subordinate who is doing a better job than himself and may eventually take his place. Such a supervisor lacks self-confidence, he does not believe in his abilities, and more often than not pursues one or two people rather than a large group. Personality theory. Many researchers believe that people who are prone to harassment have certain personality and behavioral characteristics. For example, Rayner and Cooper, 1997, identified 4 types of violent supervisors. These are pathological individuals who harass subordinates solely for pleasure, situational individuals who resort to harassment under pressure of circumstances, and role-based individuals who feel that they are expected to harass, and proponents of punishment and discipline, for whom it is the only effective management method. Rayner and Cooper state, many people resort to harassment because they find it difficult to supervise subordinates and know of no other way to manage. Others use harassment to relieve their own stress. Others behave this way because their environment considers this behavior the norm and they simply go with the flow. 1997, 214. Managing a supervisor bent on harassment. A subordinate of such a boss can use a number of strategies. Know your rights. Yesterday we talked about workers' rights. If your supervisor is prone to harassment, it's important for you to remember your rights again. Harassment at work often involves a violation of these rights. In addition to those rights that all employees have, there are also legal rights directly related to a harassing supervisor. Although you do not have a legal right not to be harassed at work, if you are fired because of such behavior by a supervisor, become ill, or are sexually harassed or racially discriminated against, see next section, you have the right to sue. There are also criminal penalties for knowingly harassing under the Criminal Law and Public Order Act of 1994. If a supervisor threatens or insults you, he or she faces real criminal penalties. There is also the Protection Against Harassment Act of 1997, which can be used in this situation, although it is more commonly used in other cases. You can use the Human Rights Act of 1998 if a supervisor's behavior violates the basic human rights of employees. You need legal advice to use these laws. But you should only use it when all other remedies have failed. Confrontation. Knowing your rights is one thing, but being able to stand up for them is something else entirely. Being confident in dealing with a harassing boss means that you must calmly point out what you don't like about his behavior, and what you find unacceptable. In other words, you need to go into a confrontation with your boss. The best way to do this is not to be reactive. That is, you should not confront him or her when he or she is harassing you. Such a confrontation is likely to be aggressive on your part or on the part of the supervisor and, therefore, unproductive. To confront your boss effectively, you need to make an appointment with him and express your grievances. Explain that you feel like a victim, that you constantly feel pressured, that your rights are violated. Be polite and calm, but don't apologize for your candor. You may even ask why the supervisor is behaving this way. It is quite possible that the supervisor does not even realize the suffering he is causing his subordinates, especially if he feels that this style of leadership is the only correct and effective one. If confrontation does not lead to the desired results, you can move on to the next strategy: filing a formal complaint. To do this, you must collect evidence of harassment from your supervisor. Write down all unpleasant incidents that caused you stress. Write down what happened and when it happened. Mention any witnesses to the incident as well as your feelings about it. By gathering materials, you will be prepared to file a complaint. First, you should find out if your company has rules about harassment in the workplace. Some firms have such rules, although there is no legal need for them. However, schools are required by law to have a set of anti-harassment policies. If such a policy exists, follow it. Otherwise, follow the formal procedure, and if you're not sure exactly what to do, ask your Human Resources Department for clarification. If your company is small and does not have such procedures, file a written complaint with your supervisor. State that you have evidence and witnesses. Write that you expect adequate action. If even a formal complaint does not stop your supervisor, you may consider more serious legal action. Legal procedure. This is an option for the last resort. Any litigation costs money and takes time. This means that you will have to quit your job to pursue the case. To start a lawsuit, you must gather enough evidence, including medical evidence. Visits to the doctor for stress-related reasons can be used as evidence. Contact a civil bureau, union, labor commission, or attorney. See also the section on sexual harassment. Sexual harassment. Sexual harassment occurs when your supervisor, or indeed any other person, suggests unwelcome conduct affecting the dignity of men and women in the workplace. The basic criterion is that the actions or comments are viewed by the individual as unacceptable and degrading. Conciliation Advisory and Arbitration Service Bulletin on Harassment and Harassment, July 1999. Sexual harassment by a supervisor toward a subordinate, with gender being irrelevant, may be an isolated incident, but most often it is systematic. Sexual harassment can manifest itself in the following ways: unwanted sexual innuendos such as touching, trying to get too close, sexual remarks, demonstration of offensive material, questions of a sexual nature, personal remarks regarding physical features. Your supervisor doesn't have to do it in person at all. Sexual harassment can also manifest itself in written communication, including emails, text messages, and phone conversations. Is it serious? Like harassment, sexual harassment can be detrimental to the health and well-being of employees. The victim may experience a sense of unease, a feeling of inability to cope with harassment, humiliation, unwillingness to go to work, fear, demotivation, rage, feeling bad, depression, stress. Naturally, all such symptoms can lead to decreased ability to work, failure to show up for work, and even termination of employment. Employers are legally responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of employees. In the UK, this is covered by the Health and Safety at Work Act, 1974. But what should you do if you clearly see signs of sexual harassment from your supervisor? Here's a little plan that may be helpful to you. Confrontation. The first step is to let your boss know that his actions are unpleasant and undesirable to you. He may not have intended to harass you at all and thought he was just harmlessly flirting. Some people are simply used to being touched in a social setting and do not realize that their actions may seem offensive to someone. Talking to your supervisor will give him or her an opportunity to stop this type of behavior. If his behavior was unintentional, that's where it ends. Even if that person knew his or her behavior was unacceptable, after that conversation it will be clear to him or her that you know your rights and are not going to stand for it. In many cases, that is enough. Speak firmly, don't be aggressive, be positive and calm, but don't apologize. Here's a small example of a reasonable approach to the problem. You may not realize it, but when you hug my shoulders in the office or make questionable jokes, I feel very uncomfortable. I wish it wouldn't happen again. If you find it difficult to talk to your boss about this topic, try sending him or her an email or memo. And keep a copy of the document and the response you receive. Keep a diary. As with stalking, we advise you to write down all incidents that you believe may constitute evidence of sexual harassment. Record the date, time, names of witnesses, how you feel, etc. Keep copies of all evidence, letters, memos, phone records, emails, etc. Keep information about the medical care you received, such as treatment for stress or depression. Ask for advice. Talk to a union representative, go to the Labor Commission, talk to a lawyer. They will give you advice on how to behave in this situation and what actions to take, and whether to start a lawsuit. Formal complaint. The procedure is no different from that for workplace harassment. Review commission. Labor disputes. As with harassment, you cannot legally assert your rights until after you leave work, although you can file a sexual discrimination claim while you are working. If you decide to go the legal route, you will have to go to an employment review board, and that board must be satisfied that you have made every effort to resolve the problem yourself. Generally, you should file a complaint with the board within 3 months of leaving your job or having your rights violated. If the employee wants to file a complaint, he or she needs to get a special application form from the job center. It can be downloaded from www.direct.gov.uk/n/dial1/ DOITOnline/DG_40179934. Until a formal hearing, attempts will be made to reconcile the parties. A boss who takes credit for someone else's work. Such a leader. Passing off other people's ideas as his own. Criticizes other people's ideas, but then passes them off as his own. Attributes all other people's successes to himself, but failures never. Doesn't reward employees for good work. Of course, such a supervisor may not seem as challenging as one prone to harassment or sexual harassment. And, of course, there are no official ways to combat such behavior. But such a supervisor can seriously complicate your work and completely block all paths to promotion and career advancement. After all, if no one knows about how well you work, how can you get a promotion? And when it comes to getting laid off, you'll be the first candidate, because only your department colleagues know about your skills and talents, not your superiors. 7. A good boss always encourages his subordinates for good work and tells others about it. After all, it only benefits him because people work well under his leadership. But if a supervisor is insecure, he is afraid that his subordinates will surpass him. That's why he thinks he has the right to take credit for other people's successes. Does your boss steal your progress? It will take some time before you realize that your successes have been stolen, especially If your supervisor assures you that he is showering you with praise everywhere, it may be months or even years before you realize that your boss has never once mentioned your name when communicating with your superiors. So the first step in communicating with a supervisor of this nature is to find out if there is a problem. Here are a few signs to look out for. Ideas that your boss said would never work end up in his memos and reports. Your boss requires that you list his or her name as a co-author on reports and other office documents that you prepare. Conversations with employees in other departments reveal that they have not heard anything about your successes. When you meet with upper management, it turns out that they know nothing about you. The boss insists that personal successes overshadow team efforts, so your name is not mentioned in department-wide success reports. The boss insists that all communication with superiors must go through him. How to fight such a boss? Such a boss can be defeated, but it requires some effort. When you are certain that the head of either appropriates your successes or does not report them to senior management, you need to act. The next time you have a major success, come up with a good idea, a strategy that saves money, etc. Follow this plan. Take notes. Record all memos and all conversations with your supervisor so you can prove that these successful ideas were initiated by you, not your supervisor. Keep copies of your supervisor's responses and try to get answers in writing, email, or memos. Ask questions like, "Have you considered my proposal yet?" Don't rely solely on face-to-face and telephone conversations. Collect evidence. It's always good to have some evidence of your successes and brilliant proposals on hand, otherwise it won't be hard for your boss to downplay your accomplishments. Evidence can include letters from clients, statistical reports proving savings, original, dated memos with suggestions, etc. Acting around the boss. This is not easy to do. You can't rely on your boss to evaluate your accomplishments, so you'll have to act on your own. Your method of self-promotion should depend on exactly what you want to talk about. A memo to the director or board of directors is fine if you need to report something truly outstanding. But don't forget to speak positively about your boss to mitigate his inevitably adverse reaction to your action. If your memo will contain a positive assessment of his work, he will treat you more leniently. Or you can try to accidentally bump into a superior and mention your achievements informally. Summary. Today we've talked about 3 types of difficult managers. A boss with a penchant for harassment is the most common type. If you are unlucky enough to have such a boss, it is very important to understand the problem and learn how to deal with it. As we talked about today, there are several strategies. You need to know your rights, openly voice your grievances, and if nothing helps, move on to legal action. Similar strategies can be used in dealing with sexual harassment. In both cases, you should record any unpleasant incidents. Fighting a boss who embezzles your successes is also difficult. But unlike the first 2 types, such a boss can seem charming and attractive. It will take time to figure out what is going on. Acting against such a nice person can be very difficult. It is quite possible that your boss is not as bad as the ones we talked about today. But still, your relationship cannot be called harmonious. Tomorrow we will discuss ways to solve the remaining problems in communication with the manager. Questions. You will find the answers at the end of the book. 1. Harassment does not include A. Constant criticism. B. Personal insults. C. Negative behavior exhibited only in public. D. Negative behavior exhibited publicly and privately. 2. Examples of harassment by a supervisor include: A. Harassment. B. Humiliation. C. Downplaying the importance of your accomplishments. D. A public reprimand for being late. 3. Harassment by a supervisor can cause: A. Severe stress. B. Aversion to work. C. Schizophrenia. D. Mental health problems. 4. How many adults have been harassed at work during their career? A. 100%. B. 25%. C. 50%. D. 75%. 5. Why would a supervisor harass a subordinate? Choose one reason that is not true. A. Because he himself was bullied as a child. B. Because he is jealous. C. Because he feels threatened by his subordinates. D. Because the victim annoys him terribly. 6. To file a formal complaint against a harassing supervisor, what should you not do? A. Document all negative incidents. B. Develop a company policy on workplace harassment. C. Seek out witnesses. D. File a complaint in writing. 7. Which of the following does not apply to sexual harassment? A. Unwelcome sexual innuendo. B. The habit of getting too close. C. Displaying material of a sexual nature. D. Questions about your family. 8. A supervisor who embezzles someone else's successes can: A. Always acknowledge your accomplishments. B. Publicly reward you for your ideas. C. Take credit for your successes. D. Taking responsibility for your failures. 9. A supervisor who attributes someone else's successes to himself or herself might: A. Block your promotion. B. Delay your career advancement. C. Induce a state of stress in you. D. Sexually harass you. 10. Which of the following does not indicate that a supervisor is taking credit for your success? A. The ideas he rejects later appear under his name. B. You have to put your boss's name before your own everywhere. C. People around you know nothing about your accomplishments. D. You are rewarded for your accomplishments by your superiors. Saturday. Analyzing problems that arise. By now you should be good at managing your supervisor in most everyday situations. You can even handle a difficult supervisor if you're so unlucky in life. So far, most of the material has dealt with proactive boss management, that is, a conscious effort to improve the relationship between you and your supervisor. However, sometimes a reactive approach, that is, acting only when you need to, works better. Today we're going to talk about a more reactive approach to managing your boss. We will look at some of the most common scenarios that require this attitude. We will discuss solutions to such common problems. My boss relies too much on me. I work better than my boss. My boss is having an affair and I have to cover for them. My boss counts on me to be his backup. My boss promises me a raise or a promotion but doesn't keep his word. My boss never tells me what's going on. I feel like the boss doesn't like me. My boss used to be my coworker. There is no way I can perceive him as a supervisor. My supervisor is a control freak. My boss relies on me too much. Many personal assistants and secretaries often find themselves in this situation, but it does not happen to everyone. Your supervisor is the boss and has the authority to give you assignments and, in some cases, to assign you work, taking overall control of the process. It is one step from delegating responsibilities to total dependence. Your supervisor over-relies on you if always asks for your advice, counts on you to stay late at work to help you with his business. You have to prepare all the presentations for him. He calls you at home on weekends and during vacations. You realize that you are no longer just doing the work, but you are in charge of the whole process. You feel like you do more than your boss. You organize his whole life at work. He tries to block any ideas you have. Learn how to manage your boss in 7 days. On the one hand, having your boss rely entirely on you can benefit you by becoming indispensable. You won't have to fear layoffs and layoffs. In addition, you will have good reason to ask for a raise in wages. But soon it turns out that you find yourself in a golden cage. You are well paid, but you cannot leave. The boss is so reluctant to let you go that he deliberately blocks any prospects for promotion and does not give you any recommendations. If you feel like your boss is over-relying on you, follow our advice. 1. Try to loosen your supervisor's dependence on you. Show your supervisor how the tasks he or she assigns you are accomplished. Explain that this is necessary in case you are sick or absent. When discussing projects, provide a division of labor. Tell him that you will do X, Y, and Z, and he will need to do A, B, and C. 2. Make sure that your career progression is not blocked. If you decide it's time to move on, convince your boss that you will help prepare your successor and not leave him in a difficult position. 3. Forget about work for the duration of the vacation. Make full use of the vacation. Teach your supervisor in advance how to proceed in your absence. Do not leave contact information. And don't call him yourself under any circumstances. I work better than my supervisor. This is the opposite problem and requires a completely different approach. A supervisor who over-relies on you understands and accepts your skills and talents. A boss who performs worse than you usually doesn't acknowledge this. And if he does, and quite naturally, he begins to see you as a threat. And this often becomes the very signal that the employee realizes that he or she is doing a better job than his or her boss. These signals include the following. You replace your supervisor during maternity leave or sick leave, and you realize you're doing a better job than his or her supervisor. You are doing better at your job than your boss. You have higher sales figures, more bonuses, publications, etc. You notice that other employees turn to you rather than to your boss for advice and help. The secret to managing such a boss is as follows. Try to subtly convince him that he is not risking anything, even if it is not true, and you are engaged in your own career growth. Providing such a balance is not an easy thing to do. It is clear that if you are doing a better job than the boss, then you should strive for promotion to his position or similar. However, this does not mean that you should be trying to get under your boss. On the contrary, people today are moving up the career ladder much faster than in the days when a person could work in one place their whole life, except in the most traditional industries. Therefore, by maintaining a good relationship with your boss, you can ensure that you will be recommended as his successor. If you realize that within the next couple of years your boss will move on to another job, have patience. Hide your annoyance and try to prove to him that you are the best successor possible. But what if the boss has been working for many years and is going to work here until his retirement, and he is still only 40? In that case, you're better off looking for a promotion either in another department or in another organization. Follow all the advice you find in this book to part friends with your boss and get great recommendations from him later. My boss is having an affair, and I have to cover for them. This is a very difficult situation that can be complicated by the following circumstances. You know or are friends with the spouse of the supervisor. You are being asked to lie to this person. You are expected to lie to other employees. So how do you manage such a supervisor? Should you lie to keep him calm and satisfied, or should you refuse and incur his wrath, with all the consequences for your career? The answer depends on your attitude to everything that happens. Some people believe that the personal life of the boss and any other employee does not concern them, and do not feel emotional about it. If you're willing to cover for your boss when his spouse or partner calls, do so. However, many people feel uncomfortable in this situation. They just don't like lying, and they don't like lying in the name of adultery anymore. If you need to cover for your boss in a situation like this, use our tips. 1. Talk to your boss. You should, without refusing categorically, explain to him that he is embarrassing you. Ask if there is no other way. Perhaps the supervisor can convince his spouse not to call him during work hours, or maybe he will agree to lie to you about his whereabouts so that you can honestly tell his spouse. 2. Don't preach or moralize. You may not want to lie, but it is not your business to teach your boss what is good and what is bad. He probably knows it all perfectly well himself. 3. If you cannot reach an agreement, determine what is more important to you, work or a guilty conscience. Perhaps with your help about the affair of the boss will become known fairly quickly. And if not, you will have to think about switching to another job. You yourself may not want to work with a person who not only lies to his wife/spouse, but also does not respect your desire to remain an honest person. The boss is counting on me to be on his side. It's one thing to bring your boss a sandwich, but it's quite another to pick up his clothes from the dry cleaners, buy his spouse's birthday present, book theater tickets, and buy him Christmas presents. However, there is a lot to consider when managing such a boss. Ask yourself some questions. What is the title of my position? A personal assistant can run personal errands if it allows the boss to focus entirely on the job. But you can hardly expect that from an assistant human resources manager. How is my relationship with my supervisor? If the supervisor is quite adequate, you can accept the fact that sometimes you will have to run his personal errands. Does this job give me valuable experience and training? If yes, it is worth putting up with the minor inconveniences for your own sake. The valuable experience will help you build your career in the future. Does running personal errands for a supervisor come at the expense of my day job? If so, it means that the situation is out of control. Do I have to stay late after work to run personal errands for my supervisor and manage my own work? If yes, you need to have a serious talk with your supervisor. If, after asking yourself these questions, you decide that you can't tolerate this situation and keep quiet, it's time to have a serious talk with your supervisor. Tell him that running personal errands is to the detriment of the quality of your work. Explain that you are willing to help the boss sometimes, but you are paid for a completely different job. You can't concentrate if you constantly have to run errands that aren't part of your job description. Your supervisor may have no idea how much time you spend on his or her tasks. It would be helpful to record the time spent so that he realizes that his individual errands are taking you more than 5 hours a week. My boss promised me a raise or a promotion, but he never kept his promise. This is a surprisingly common problem. The specificity or vagueness of your boss's promises leads you to believe that you're in for a raise or raise, but then the boss simply forgets about the promise or says that you misunderstood his words. Usually such promises are made in exchange for overtime or special attention to important work. And sometimes the boss is just trying to keep you in the job during difficult times. If this happens, there's not much you can do to get your boss to keep his word. But this experience will teach you a lot. The next time you hear a promise like this, follow our advice. 1. The promise must be exact. Promises of raises and promotions are often made in vague terms. If we get this contract, I will thank you, or it is in your interest to finish this project quickly. It's very important that the offer be specific. Ask the supervisor to be more specific. Ask what exactly he means by his gratitude or your best interest. If he starts to wiggle, ask if it means a raise or a raise. Ask about the amount of the raise or position you can expect. 2. The promise must be in writing. Send your supervisor a memo, dated, stating that you are happy to receive an offer of a raise or promotion upon completion of a particular project. 3. Ask about the outcome. When the job is finished or completed that you were promised a raise for, remind your supervisor of what he said. The boss never tells me what's going on. Of course, your boss doesn't have to tell you everything that's going on, but information about what concerns you can make your life more comfortable. A supervisor unreasonably withholds important information from you if you are unexpectedly transferred to another office without prior notice. You see an ad in the newspaper about a new position at your company, which you didn't even know about. There are rumors about a merger, but your boss won't say anything. You learn about everything important from rumors, not from your boss. Employees in other departments know more about changes in the company than you do. The best way to manage a boss like this is to team up with your colleagues, because this position annoys them just as much as it annoys you. If you work in a small firm or department and such association is not possible, you will have to act alone. Either way, our tips will come in handy. Learn to manage your boss in 7 days. 1. Collect evidence. Complaining about the lack of information without supporting your words with evidence is pointless. But if you give some examples of when you were not informed about something important, and for no reason at all, your position becomes more valid. Explain why it bothers you. Withholding information can be annoying, but sometimes it has very real, practical consequences. You should tell your boss about your doubts and the implications of the lack of information for your productivity and enthusiasm. For example, if you knew about something, you could have prepared ahead of time and not wasted extra time later. 3. Emphasize the positive side. Try not to pounce on your boss with accusations and criticism. Explain that you like his behavior in other areas, such as the allocation of work stages, communication with employees, etc. This will greatly increase your chances of success. I don't think my boss likes me. The boss does not have to like you. He should respect your work, but do not become your best friend. However, we all know that a close relationship with your boss is very important. In this case, you can count on him. Will provide you with services. He will comply with your requests. Will give you an indulgence if necessary. Make your working conditions comfortable. Will assign you interesting work. But how do you know if your boss doesn't like you? Most of us feel a lack of sympathy instinctively, but there are certain signals you should pay attention to. The supervisor is not smiling at you, but is smiling at other employees. You are clearly annoying the boss. The boss avoids you. A boss gives you the most uninteresting work. A boss seldom complies with your requests or provides services. The best way to manage such a boss is to try to find out what he doesn't like about you. But be careful. Strive for such honesty should be only when you are ready for it. Do not honestly ask the boss why he does not like you, and he will probably deny everything, because no one wants to look in the eyes of others angry and heartless man. It's much better to ask if there is anything in your actions or inactions that he would prefer to change. The best time to ask this is during the annual performance review, but if it is still a long way off, you can find another opportunity. If the supervisor doesn't want to talk about your lapses, help him out by giving him a couple of examples. If you can get at least one reason out of him, consider whether you can change the problematic situation. Although it's quite possible that you just didn't get along and you'll have to deal with it or leave. My boss used to be my colleague, there is no way I can accept him as my supervisor. This situation poses a number of problems. It is almost inevitable, most likely one of your colleagues will get a promotion and become your boss. And cope with this will be difficult for both of you. You will be tormented by jealousy and resentment because the colleague left you behind. And it will be difficult for him to be the boss and command his former friends and colleagues. Our tips will be useful to you. 1. A colleague became the boss, get over it. You must swallow your resentment and forget about it. Such feelings are destructive and can damage your career. Your colleague may not have deserved the promotion, but there's nothing you can do about it, so it's better just not to think about it. Trying to sabotage the actions of your new boss could cost you dearly. 2. Be honest. Tell your boss that the new position makes you feel uncomfortable. Chances are he feels the same way. Once you understand each other, you can discuss and agree on the new rules of the game, whether you will continue to have lunch together, drinks after work, etc. Be on his side. The best way to manage the boss in this situation, to help him and be on his side. This transition is difficult for him, too, and he will be grateful that you made it easier for him during this period. 4. Forget the familiarity. Try not to go too far in trying to maintain a buddy relationship with your new boss. Excessive familiarity has a downside: the boundaries between work and personal life become blurred. Boss can start to take advantage of your friendship and ask you for favors, for example, always staying late after work or working on the weekends. And you will find it harder to say no to him than to a boss who has never been your friend. It is very important for both of you to separate friendship and work, even if at the end of the day these two sides of your life will sometimes merge again. My boss is just a control freak. You understand that a supervisor is a control freak if he absolutely cannot delegate responsibilities. He goes into so much detail about your work that he could have done it himself. He wants to know absolutely everything you do. He insists on doing things the way he thinks they should be done. He calls you 3 times a day while on vacation. He rarely takes a full vacation. He wants detailed progress reports all the time. Learn how to manage your boss in 7 days. The only way to manage this type of boss is to instill confidence in him by playing by his rules. Such a boss is afraid to let the reins out of his hands, believing that otherwise everything will collapse. You need to convince him otherwise, that not only everything will not collapse, but it will work even better. And this can only be achieved over time. Take advantage of our advice. Anticipate your boss's need for supervision by providing him with reports and other documentation regularly, and at his own initiative. Communicate with your supervisor on a regular basis so he or she has no need to contact you. Do the job exactly as he says, don't be tempted to do it his way, yet. Don't pester your boss for more freedom. Make sure that you know exactly what the situation is and how the work is progressing, so that you can always give an answer to the boss's questions. Work logically. This will please your boss, who values order above all else. If you follow this advice for a few months or longer, your boss will gradually learn to trust you. Those who like to control everything usually have 1 or 2 people they trust. But if you become one of these people, continue to behave in the same way as before. The only difference is that now you will be able to suggest something or make small changes. The boss who seeks total control is not afraid of change. He is afraid that the situation will get out of his control. So any change you propose should include him too, even better if you can convince the boss that it's his own idea. Summary. So, today we ended the week by discussing the 9 most common problems you may encounter in your relationship with your boss. We discussed the solution to each problem in detail and tried to touch on just about every difficulty that can arise in the office. By dealing with these situations in a positive way, you can turn a potential source of problems and conflict into something more manageable and appealing. Even if you haven't yet encountered any of the problems described here, it's worth remembering, forewarned is forearmed. Chances are, at some point in your career, you will probably encounter one or more of these problems. By this time, your skills are so broad that you'll be able to handle your boss both proactively and reactively, and from the very first meeting. Over time, you will have accumulated practice in managing your boss and will be able to build a strong, positive, and mutually beneficial relationship with almost any supervisor. The questions, you will find the answers at the end of the book are: 1. You will find that a supervisor relies on you too much if, choose a false statement. A. He constantly asks you for advice. B. You have to prepare reports and presentations for him. C. He is constantly calling you when you are on vacation. D. He is always criticizing your work. 2. You realize that you are doing a better job than your boss if, choose a false statement. A. You are filling in for him during his illness and are doing a better job. B. Your accomplishments are greater than his, example, your sales figures are higher. C. You stay in the office longer than he does. D. People seek advice from you rather than your boss. 3. Your supervisor is having an affair and is counting on you to cover for him. You should: A. Refuse. B. Lie to his spouse. C. Give him a sermon on immoral behavior. D. Explain to him how uncomfortable this situation is for you. 4. A supervisor should not count on you to A. Will make coffee for him. B. Choose gifts for his wife's birthday. C. Pick up his clothes from the dry cleaners. D. You will stay late at work because it takes you too long to run his errands. 5. If your boss has promised you a promotion, which of the following should you not do? A. Fix the promise in writing. B. Ask for an explanation of the terms. C. Asking you to follow through on your promise. D. Sit quietly and wait for the promotion. 6. Which of the following is not appropriate for managing a supervisor who withholds information from you? A. Teaming up with coworkers. B. Collecting evidence. C. Complaining to your supervisor that he never tells you what is going on. D. Using specific examples. 7. Which of the following is not a sign that a supervisor doesn't like you? A. He rarely smiles at you, but he smiles at other employees. B. He expects too much from you. C. He gives you the most unpleasant job. D. He rarely complies with your requests and services. 8. Your colleague has become your boss, and now you have to cope. A. With jealousy and resentment. B. With the desire to complain about him behind his back. C. With a desire to tell him how you feel. D. With a desire to talk to him as his best friend. 9. Which of the following is a sign that your boss is literally a control freak? A. He is always delegating responsibilities. B. He is happy to let you work however you want. C. He doesn't communicate with his staff, but he calls constantly when he's gone on vacation. D. He wants to change everything you do. 10. Which of the following strategies should not be used to manage a supervisor who seeks total control? A. Constantly reporting back and keeping the supervisor informed of progress. B. Do most of the work as he demands and do the rest in his own way. C. Impress upon him the confidence you have in yourself. D. Let him control you the way he wants. Surviving in difficult times. In these tough economic times, the importance of effectively managing your boss increases 100-fold. In calm times, we can always quit our jobs under a difficult boss and go in search of something new. Today, the choices are markedly diminished, and few dare to quit their jobs. And since the possibility of quitting is highly undesirable for most of us, the ability to get along with a boss becomes even more valuable than before. There are even more reasons not to clash with management today, because in a harsh environment, such conflicts will further increase stress and tension at work. Here are 10 tips to help you manage your boss effectively. 1. Don't wait, start managing your boss right now. It's very easy to put off managing your boss until problems arise. But in these challenging times, it's impossible to guess what's waiting for you around the corner. Everyone is under pressure at work, and this can cause even a great boss you've always gotten along with to take unpopular steps and actions that will put you in a difficult position. Or, as is happening more and more often today, a good and beloved boss leaves or moves to another position, and you have to deal with a new, complete stranger. Either way, your best bet is to start managing your boss immediately. 2. A good impression is everything. Creating and maintaining a good impression is the most important strategy for managing your boss. In today's tough times, its role is even more important. Bosses who have to go to unpopular austerity measures are facing increasing hostility from subordinates. But it's important to remember that the boss is fighting for the firm's survival. His toughness is apparently necessary, so try to contain your dislike and give the boss all kinds of support. He will appreciate it. 3. Find out your boss's leadership style. In our difficult times, supervisors have to take on a difficult new role, which means that their leadership style may change. Whereas the boss used to like to consult and advise, cutting back on orders has turned him or her into a real dictator. Even if you thought you knew your boss's leadership style, use our tips to make sure you don't miss the change in that style due to the changing economic climate. 4. Spare no time for the psychological contract. The psychological contract covers all the unwritten agreements related to issues such as work schedule, ability to work from home, level of proactivity, whether you are expected to look for a job yourself or wait to be assigned one, and professional development, availability of retraining and professional development courses. In these difficult times, such rules are constantly changing, so reviewing your psychological contract can be very helpful. 5. Determine your boss's communication style. Here by communication style we mean what kind of communication your boss likes most: emails or personal communication, regular information on the progress of work or only when his intervention is needed to solve a problem, etc. While in the past your boss may have preferred frequent face-to-face communication with subordinates, the rules may have changed in today's harsh environment, and now there simply isn't time for that luxury. Find out how your supervisor prefers to communicate with those around him, and this will allow you to avoid annoying him and make his life easier. 6. Find out your boss's primary motivations. Everyone has a different way of thinking. By figuring out how your boss thinks, you will be able to work according to his or her style. In these difficult times, when time and resources have become especially valuable, your boss will appreciate your efforts to save his time and your effort to work in accordance with the ways he is used to processing information, and it will benefit both of you. 7. Be a professional. When many of us have to do more work with fewer resources, it's easy to make concessions. But the key to successful boss management lies in absolute professionalism. And in this area, it's not a good idea to go easy on yourself. Professionalism is punctuality, compliance with the dress code, meeting deadlines, and a vivid presentation of one's own work. You should not compromise your principles in this respect, even in hard times. 8. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. In tough times, under the threat of being fired, it's easy to keep your head down and not rock the boat. But when your boss wants to throw as much work as possible on your shoulders because of cutbacks and lack of resources, it is important to stand up for your rights. You must be able to stand up for yourself even in such a difficult moment. I hope that this book has shown you how to get what you want without the threat of dismissal. 9. Don't put up with a difficult boss. In tough economic times, with layoffs everywhere, many of us are glad to have a job, any job. And that means we can tolerate the antics of a difficult boss when finding a new job is easy. However, the choice is not just between patience and quitting. Even a difficult boss is quite manageable. And because it is more dangerous to quit today than ever before, it is important to manage the relationship with your boss, even when it seems like patience is over. 10. Try to make life as easy as possible for your boss. And here's our final tip: the more you make life easier for your boss, the better your relationship with him will be. When times are tough, Your boss shows the toughness that is natural for a manager who has to make tough decisions in the name of financial stability. You can make his life easier by meeting and exceeding his expectations, even if it has become more difficult to do so. It's worth considering how you can lighten his load. If you show your boss that you stand by his side, he'll take your side when needed.